In John's gospel, one of the organizing principles of the story are the 7 I am statements. We've already talked about this several times, but I'll just go over them quickly by way of reminder. 7 times Jesus says, I am. He says, I am the bread of life. I am the light of the world. I am the gate for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I am the resurrection and the life. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And I am the true vine. Last week we looked at the 3rd I am statement, which is that I am the gate. And we talked about what that means. And this morning we're going to study what it means that Jesus is the good shepherd. In 2023, Colorado introduced wolves onto state land. Did you guys know about this? Even though wolves are not an endangered species, when you look at the global population, Colorado decided they wanted to restore their wolf population to what it was prior to the state being settled by people in the 19th century. And as you can probably imagine, this has been a pretty controversial decision. And it has sparked a lot of debate among outdoor enthusiasts and conservationists and hunters, and even people who are not in that category online about whether or not wolves are dangerous to people. I heard about this on the Joe Rogan podcast, and he was arguing back and forth with one of his guests about whether or not wolves pose a threat to people. And of course, I'm no authority on this topic, but because of John 10, the content of our passage this week, I decided I'm going to do a little research on wolves. And I came across several articles, and many of them were shocking. But one of them came from NBC World News. This is from just 2 years ago, the year 2024, in Uttar Pradesh, which is a state in northern India, in the mountains on the border of Nepal. In 2024, over the course of a few months, there was a pack of wolves that killed 10 people and seriously injured over 30 more. It's a horrible story. I mean, it's horrific. I was going to read some of the article, but I was like, it's too sad. I'm not going to read any of this. But regardless of whether or not it's a good idea to reintroduce wolves in the state of Colorado, there's no question that wolves are very, very dangerous animals. I actually have a photo here. And on the left, that is a gray wolf. This is the type of wolf, or very close to the type of wolf, that Jesus would have been talking about, that place and time in history. Now, full disclosure, this is an AI-generated image, okay? So take it with a grain of salt, but I think it's a good representation of the size of a wolf. So on the right-hand side of this gentleman, there's a full-grown German Shepherd. If you guys are familiar with that, that's a big dog. This guy is about 5'10", and so a wolf, a full-grown wolf, is about the size of a Great Dane. They are huge, huge animals. The average gray wolf weighs about 150 pounds. A really big male can get up over 200 pounds. And if you encounter a wolf in the wild, you're not going to encounter just one of them. They are pack animals. They attack together, and they're not only big, they are also fast. They can reach running speeds of up to 40 miles an hour. They have a bite force of over 400 pounds per square inch, which means they can break bones with their bite. And they're predators. They eat live meat. And so, of course, they're dangerous. I mean, what are we talking about? Of course, they're dangerous animals. And this is a big part of the point that Jesus is making in John 10. He says in verse 11, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. The hired hand, since he is not the shepherd and doesn't own the sheep, leaves them and runs away when? When he sees a wolf coming. The wolf then snatches and scatters them. And to understand what Jesus means when he says, I am the good shepherd, you first need to understand that we live in a world that is inhabited by wolves. That is the reality. Now, of course, there are physical dangers in our world. There are actual wolves and bears and tornadoes and floods. We live in a world filled with danger, but that's not what Jesus is talking about primarily. He's saying there is spiritual danger, spiritual threats in the world. There's temptation, and there is sin, and there is darkness, and there is deception. There is real evil in the world. And because of that, people need spiritual protection. people need a shepherd. And Jesus' claim is, I am that shepherd. I am the good shepherd. And he gives us 3 proofs, 3 reasons why he is the good shepherd. Reason number 1, why Jesus is the good shepherd. Jesus lays his life down for the sheep. He says this 5 times in 2 paragraphs. Jesus lays his life down for the sheep. Verse 11, I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. Now, why would a shepherd, whose job it is to care for and protect sheep, run away when a wolf comes? That's the opposite of what they're supposed to do. Well, it's because wolves don't just kill sheep. Wolves can kill people too. And what that means is that shepherding is dangerous. Shepherding is costly. I don't know, when you think of a shepherd, what comes to mind? In a church context, I think a lot of times what we think about is this sort of whimsical nativity scene, like from Christmas. And the shepherds are wearing clean white robes, and they have a little staff shaped like a question mark, and there's just fluffy sheep around, and everybody's sitting on comfortable pillows made of wool. That's not what shepherding was. Shepherding was dangerous. David was a shepherd. And David said, listen, I'm not scared of this giant because I've killed bears and lions and wolves with rocks and sticks. I mean, shepherding was wild. It's dangerous. And this is the fundamental difference between Jesus and the hired hand. Jesus was willing to die for his sheep. And you see this during Jesus' earthly ministry. As a man, Jesus sacrificed everything for his disciples. Practically, physically. Forget about the cross for a minute. Just the way that he lived and organized his life, it was all designed for his followers and even for the crowds, the people who would ultimately reject him. He lived a life where he gave up his comfort. He gave up his time and energy. He gave up his career trajectory, his financial situation, his reputation. He gave all of that away for the benefit of other people. And that's in contrast to the Pharisees. The Pharisees were the spiritual leaders of the Jewish people at this time in history, the religious leaders. And they did the exact opposite of what Jesus modeled. They took advantage of the people. They extorted them financially. They set up systems and standards that were designed not to bless the people, not to help them and give them life, but to suppress them, to manipulate them. To keep the people in a position of leadership over their followers and control them, not to serve them. But way more important than the way Jesus lived when he was on earth, Jesus was not only willing to die, he actually did die for his sheep. And this imagery of the shepherd dying for the sheep, it's not something Jesus just creatively made up. It's not just a metaphor that he felt like was good for his teaching point. This was prophesied about in the Old Testament. The idea of the shepherd dying for the sheep. It was imagery about the Messiah. In the book of Zechariah, chapter 11, verse 7 and 8, the Messiah is the rejected shepherd. In Zechariah chapter 12, verse 10, the Messiah is pierced and mourned over. In Zechariah 13:7, the Messiah is the shepherd who is struck down by God himself. And so when Jesus says, I am the good shepherd, this is a claim to be the Messiah, the Savior of the world. It's more than just a metaphor. The greatest threat facing every person is not external, which is hard to believe. We live in a dangerous world. We live in a chaotic world. But it's not wolves out there in the scary, evil world. The greatest threat facing every person, every one of you, is the evil that lives inside you. It's the evil that is a part of you. The Bible calls it sin. People are sinful. In Matthew's gospel, when the angel Gabriel comes to Joseph and he says, listen, your wife, Mary, your future bride, she's going to have a baby. And he says in verse 21, she will give birth to a son, and you are to name him Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins. That's what Jesus came to save us from. He came to save us from our sins. Now, why is sin such a great threat? Well, sin is what produces all of the other darkness in the world. All the greed, all the pride, all of the lust, all of the hatred, and all of the deceit, all of the deception to cover it up. That all comes from sin in the human heart. And those things pose a great threat to human flourishing, certainly. But the even greater threat is what your sin earns for you in God's economy. That's the greatest threat. Because God is just, because he is so good and holy, he must punish sin, which means he must punish your sin. And so when Jesus says that he lays his life down for the sheep, he's talking about his death on the cross. Obviously. And we know that because he also says in verse 17, this is why the Father loves me, because I lay my life down so that I may take it up again. Meaning I'm going to die so that I can rise from death. And so Jesus is saying the way you know I'm the good shepherd is that I'm going to die on the cross and I'm going to rise from the dead. But why does Jesus do that? Well, he explains. It's for the sheep. The Messiah dies for his sheep, meaning what? Well, a lot of this same prophetic imagery in the Old Testament that we just looked at in Zechariah about the shepherd is paralleled in Isaiah. Isaiah prophesies many things about the Messiah. But look at this passage in Isaiah chapter 53. Again, written about 700 years before Jesus lived. It says in verse 3, he was despised and rejected by men, a man of suffering who knew what sickness was. He was like someone people turned away from. He was despised and didn't value him. Yet he himself bore our sicknesses, and he carried our pains, but we in turn regarded him stricken, struck down by God, and afflicted. That's Zechariah 13 imagery. He was pierced because of our rebellion. That's Zechariah 12 imagery. Crushed because of our iniquities or sins. Punishment for our peace was on him, and we are healed by his wounds. We all went astray like sheep. We all have turned to our own way, and the Lord has punished him, this Messiah shepherd, for the iniquity of us all. The good shepherd laid his life down as a substitute. His life for yours. He takes the penalty from God that is aimed at you because of your guilt and your sin, and he receives it on himself on the cross so that you can have his righteousness, so that you can have his freedom. What other human being could face down the wolf of the curse of sin? Who could do that? Nobody could do that. Only Jesus. He was uniquely qualified as the good shepherd, because that description, it's not just a claim to be the Messiah. It is that, but it's more than that. It's also a claim to be God himself. I am the good shepherd is a claim to be God. This is the cumulative case that Jesus is making all throughout the Gospel of John, but particularly in this section. This is the cumulative case. And we know that because we're going to get this next week in verse 30. The Jews then, at the end of a couple of different conversations, they pick up rocks, and their intention is to murder Jesus right there. They're going to kill him. Why? They say, because you, a man, are claiming to be God. So this is the way they understood it. But why did they understand it this way? How is the claim to be the good shepherd equivalent to claiming to be God? Moses was a shepherd, famously. David, of course, we already talked about, was a shepherd. But in the Old Testament, God himself was the ultimate shepherd. You see this in David's writing. David was a shepherd. He was a really skilled and good shepherd. But then also metaphorically, he was the shepherd of God's people as the king of Israel, probably the greatest human king of Israel that ever lived prior to the coming of Jesus. But David himself writes in Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd. He's a shepherd. He's shepherding God's people. He says, but the ultimate shepherd, it is God himself. The Lord is my shepherd. I have what I need. He lets me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He renews my life. Last week, Eric shared from Ezekiel 34, another important prophetic passage about the coming of the Messiah. And in Ezekiel 34, God is rebuking the religious leaders of the nation of Israel, and he calls them shepherds. And he says, you've been bad shepherds. You're terrible shepherds. Not only do you not protect the sheep, you don't care for the sheep, you don't go and find the sheep when they wander away, but you abuse the sheep. You're using the sheep. He's rebuking the leaders of Israel. But later in that same chapter, God says this, Ezekiel 34, verse 11. God says, see, I myself will search for my flock and look for them. As a shepherd looks for his sheep on the day he is among his scattered flock, so I will look for my flock. I will rescue them from all the places where they have been scattered on a day of clouds and total darkness. I will bring them out from the peoples, gather them from the countries, and bring them to their own soil. I will shepherd them on the mountains of Israel, in the ravines and in the inhabited places of the land. I will tend to them in good pasture, and their grazing place will be on Israel's lofty mountains. There they will lie down in a good grazing place. They will feed in rich pasture on the mountains of Israel. I will tend my flock and let them lie down. This is the declaration of the Lord God. God is the shepherd of his people. And so Jesus is saying, I am that shepherd. The good shepherd. The Greek word here for good, it's the word kalos, and it doesn't mean good like skilled at shepherding. I think that's the way we tend to read it. Like if I say I'm a good basketball player, or I am a good gardener or something, what that means is I'm skilled at that activity, but that's not what Jesus is saying. This word good, it means morally good. It means honorable, noble. The good, noble shepherd. So the reason that Jesus can die in your place for your sins is because he is God himself. He is the eternal Son of the Father, without any sin of his own, perfectly holy and righteous. That's why he can take your penalty. That's why he can give you his righteousness. That's the first and most important reason why he is the good shepherd. He lays his life down for his sheep. Second reason why Jesus is the good shepherd. Number 2, Jesus knows his sheep and his sheep know him. Verse 14, he says, I am the good shepherd. I know my own and my own know me, just as the Father knows me and I know the Father. Okay, so here's a very important question. Are you in Jesus' flock? Are you one of Jesus' sheep? Well, how do you know if you're in Jesus' flock or not? There's a simple test. Do you know him? Do you know him? Does he know you? You remember that right before this, verse 9, Jesus said, I am the gate. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will come in and go out and find pasture. Meaning, if you believe that Jesus died for you, if you believe that he is the Son of God, the eternal Messiah, if you're trusting him to save you from your sin through his death and resurrection, then you enter his pasture. You join his flock. And that means that you will know him. Not just know about him, but you will actually experience a relationship with him. Years ago, there was a well-known economist who got into politics, and he was running for Congress. This is like 50 years ago. You probably would not recognize his name unless you're older than me. But part of his pitch to his constituency was that Americans would make better economic policy decisions if they simply thought in terms of, what will be best for my children? Okay, let's enact laws, let's make policy decisions, just really straightforward. What's going to be best for my kids? And he was sharing this sort of paradigm and framework at a town hall meeting, and it was televised, and somebody in the audience raised their hand. They were someone who was kind of on the other side of the political issues, and they offered this rebuttal. They said, well, listen, that's great, but I think we need to care about all of the kids. We need to think about all of the children, and in fact, I love your kids just as much as you do. And then this guy running for Congress famously responded, really? Then tell me what their names are. And his point, of course, was, no, you don't. No, you don't. Nobody loves my kids the way I love my kids. And so, of course, it is true that God loves all people. He wants all people to be saved. But it's also true that he has a unique, personal, intimate love for those who are his children, those who believe. How do you know that? Well, Jesus says, my own know me, listen to this, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. I want you to think about what that means for a moment. So, the Bible teaches that we worship one God. There's one God, only one, and he exists eternally in three persons. This is the doctrine of the Trinity. So for all of eternity past, before the creation of the universe, before matter and time and space existed, there was God, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. For all of eternity past. This is who God is. One God existing in perfect relationship of three persons. And Jesus says, my own know me, just as the Father knows me, and I know the Father. Jesus, along with the Father and the Holy Spirit, have known each other in perfect loving relationship forever. Before there was anything. Before there was this building, before there was the state of Iowa, before there were the Rocky Mountains, before there was the Pacific Ocean, before there was the sun or the Milky Way, the whole universe, there was nothing. God was existing in perfect, loving relationship among the persons of the Trinity. It's hard to even wrap our minds around what that means. But Jesus is saying, the people who are mine, they know me the way I know the Father, and the Father knows me. Not only that, when Jesus became a man, he modeled what it looks like for a human to relate to God the Father. He constantly went away to get alone with the Father, to pray, to hear from the Father. He studied and memorized and meditated on the words of the Father in the Scriptures. You ever think about this? Like, it doesn't tell us this, but I'm fairly certain that this is true. I think it's implied that Jesus, he wasn't born like a superhuman cyborg where he just had the whole Bible sort of uploaded into his brain. He had to learn to read. He had to study it. He had to memorize it. He had to be taught and learn it. And he spent thousands of hours over the course of his life listening, learning from the Father in his word. He obeyed the Father. He made the Father's mission his life's work. He relied on the Father's strength. He was comforted and encouraged by him. He glorified him and pointed others to him. His whole life revolved around his relationship, experientially, moment by moment, day by day, with God the Father. God the Father occupied the same type of space in Jesus' earthly life that a good human father occupies in the life of their child. I remember when I was a little boy, like 4 or 5 years old, and my whole world revolved around my dad. I mean, I still think my dad is cool, but when I was a kid, I was like, Michael Jordan's okay, but I want to hang out with my dad. When is dad coming home? My whole life, when's he coming home from work? I can't wait to get to the weekend so that we can play video games, and we can go to the park, and we can wrestle, and we can watch movies and make popcorn. I just wanted to do whatever my dad was doing. Do you know Jesus like that? Have you experienced him like that? If you're in his flock, then you have. Maybe not perfectly day by day. Maybe you have seasons of dryness, seasons of discouragement, seasons where you're not spending time with him, but you have tasted it. read a story about a dad in Florida. This was in 2013. And him and his family were visiting a state park in the Everglades. And his 6-year-old son got snatched by an alligator near the water. And this dad, he didn't look around for a weapon. He didn't call the police. He sprinted into the water, jumped on top of this alligator, and started punching it in the head repeatedly until it let go of his son. He said in an interview afterwards that it felt like punching a cinder block. I don't know if you've ever seen an alligator head. It's just a giant piece of solid bone. It's a crazy story. And the boy actually had very minimal injuries. It's incredible. Now, how many of you, don't raise your hand, but how many of you would sprint into the water and fight an alligator to rescue a total stranger? We got one brave soul right here. Now, I hope that I could have that kind of courage. But I don't know. But if it's your own kid, I mean, you dads, it's like, there's no question. There's no question. You would lay your life down. And this is why Jesus lays his life down, because they are his sheep. He knows them and they know him. So how do you know if you're in Jesus' flock? Well, do you know him? But there's another test, another question, which is, do you care about the other sheep in the flock? That's another way that you know. Jesus says in verse 12, the hired hand, since he's not the shepherd and doesn't own the sheep, leaves them and runs away when he sees a wolf coming. Then the wolf snatches and scatters them. Okay, again, why does the hired hand run from the wolf? Well, it's because wolves are dangerous. They are sheep killers, but they are also people killers. They can do a lot of damage to a human as well. But there's a deeper reason than just the danger. Jesus says in verse 13, this happens because he's a hired hand and doesn't care about the sheep. That's the heart of the issue. He doesn't care about the sheep. Now, of course, Jesus' main point is that he cares about the sheep. That's what he's trying to say. But it follows logically that if you are a Christian and your good shepherd who you love and worship cares so much about your fellow Christians, your brothers and sisters, that he died for them as well as you, that you should have the attitude of Jesus, that you're willing to lay your life down for them as well. Because my shepherd, my God, who loves me and gave his life for me, he also gave his life for them. This is exactly what Jesus teaches later, much later. He says to Peter at the end of John's gospel, you remember Peter, who denied Jesus 3 times, who ran away from Jesus, who abandoned Jesus, committed horrific sin. Jesus restores him. Jesus says, listen, I died for you. I am your good shepherd. And then he says this, verse 15 of John 21, when they had eaten breakfast, Jesus asked Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Yes, Lord, he said to him. You know that I love you. Feed my lambs, he told him. Second time he asked him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Yes, Lord, he said to him. You know that I love you. Shepherd my sheep, he told him. Now, of course, Peter had a unique role in the early church. Peter was the leader of the disciples. He was an apostle, big A. There are no more apostles. That ministry ended during the apostolic era. So he was a leader and a shepherd in a way that not every Christian is going to be called to. But the heart of Jesus' command is for every Christian. And we know that because he instructs all of his followers, his disciples specifically, in John 13. This is the night before he goes to the cross, and he washes their feet. You remember the scene. And after Jesus washes their feet, they're stunned. They can't believe that Jesus, who they worship, is washing their feet like a slave. And after Jesus does this, he says to them, verse 14 of John 13, so if I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I've given you an example that you also should do just as I have done for you. Later in verse 34, he says, I give you a new command, love one another. Just as I have loved you, you are also to love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you love one another. I'm not saying you have to be best friends with everyone in the church. That's not realistic. But you do need to care about your brothers and sisters. So that's the question. Do you care enough about your brothers and sisters that you're willing to inconvenience yourself? That you're willing to sacrifice? That you're willing to give your life for theirs in meaningful ways? A lot of times, this is just showing up for people. You can't love people, you can't sacrifice people, you can't practically care for people if you're not there. So that's a big part of it. Sometimes it goes beyond that. Sometimes it can mean wading into the messy parts of their life. It can mean sticking with them when they're difficult or distant or needy. It can mean serving in ways that are costly and time-consuming. It can mean a whole host of different things depending on how God leads you. But the question is, do you care about the people in your local church? If you do, that's a very good indication that you're a part of Jesus' flock. And you know him. So that's the second reason Jesus gives, that he is the good shepherd. Third and final reason why Jesus is the good shepherd. Number 3, Jesus gathers together one flock. Verse 16, but I have other sheep that are not from this sheep pen. I must bring them also, and they will listen to my voice. Then there will be one flock, one shepherd. What does that mean? It means that it's not just Jewish people who Jesus came to save. He came to save Gentiles as well, which is very good news for most of us. This would have been shocking to Jews in the first century, but it's also totally consistent with Old Testament prophecy about the Messiah. Look at Isaiah 49. God says about the Messiah in verse 6, it is not enough for you to be my servant, raising up the tribes of Jacob and restoring the protected ones of Israel. So he's talking, God the Father, to the Messiah. And he says, I will also make you a light for the nations, to be my salvation to the ends of the earth. Jesus died not only for the Jews, but also for the Gentiles, all the non-Jews. And he died not only for the people of his generation 2,000 years ago, but for all generations, including us. And he died for all the people who have yet to hear the gospel and believe. Jesus is still seeking and saving those who are lost. I want to close quickly with 3 points of application. Number 1, care about Jesus' sheep that are in the flock. Show up for them. Be willing to lay your life down for them. Serve them. Prioritize them. Cultivate affection for them. Number 2, care about Jesus' sheep that are not yet in the flock. Part of the Christian life is following Jesus' example of giving his life away so that other people can come to know him. And this is a big part of why the Christian life is difficult, by the way, and requires endurance, because if you want people to become Christians, you have to take risks. You have to make investments in them. You have to invite people into your life. You have to invite people to church. You have to invite people to community group, to study the Bible with you. And that takes time, and it takes energy, and it takes relational capital. And often, it doesn't result in them coming to faith in Jesus. It's not like you just start trying to do this and then you're just going to be baptizing someone every month. Jesus was the greatest Bible teacher who ever lived. He could perform miracles, and he literally died for the sins of the world, and most people did not believe in him during his earthly ministry. Not everyone will believe, but we should care enough about them to invite them to believe, because that's what our good shepherd did for us. And because selfishly, that's where you experience the greatest intimacy with him. You want to walk with Jesus? You got to go where he goes. You got to do what he does. Paradoxically, that sacrificial life is where you experience the greatest joy and fulfillment in this life. It is worth it. And Jesus, through you, he will call some people into his flock. And then number 3, delight in knowing Jesus. Delight in knowing him. If you are a Christian, this is your birthright. You get to know your good shepherd. So don't waste that opportunity. Don't waste it today. Don't waste it tomorrow. Don't waste it ever. Walk with him. Enjoy him. Be with him. I'm going to close by reading Psalm 23. And as we read it, I just want you to pray through this with me and think about what you have in Jesus, if he's your shepherd. Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd. I have what I need. He lets me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He renews my life. He leads me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even when I go through the darkest valley, I fear no danger, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Only goodness and faithful love will pursue me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord as long as I live. Let's pray. God, thank you that you are a good shepherd. Thank you that you have defeated our greatest threat, which is sin and death. Lord, I thank you that in spite of all of the chaos and pain and difficulty and fear that we face in this life, we have the hope of life eternal with you. And you don't leave us. You're with us. You've given us your spirit. You walk with us. You shepherd us still. And I pray, God, that you'd help our church sense what a great privilege it is to have you as our shepherd. That we wouldn't neglect to be with you, to obey you, to love you, to get alone with you, to tell others about you the way you modeled for us, Lord Jesus. Thank you and we praise you in Jesus' precious name. Amen.